The Odyssey is a poem about Odysseus. His name is in the title, his journey is the subject, and yet Homer does not show him to us for the first 4 books. Instead, we get his son. Telemachus is 20 years old. He was born just before his father sailed to Troy. He has grown up entirely without a father, without a model of what a man of authority looks like, without anyone to teach him how to hold a household, how to speak in an assembly, how to command respect. The suitors who have occupied his home have been there for years. They eat his inheritance, they drink his wine, they compete for his mother. And there is nothing he can do about it. This is Homer's opening, not a hero in action, but a young man who sits among men who have taken everything that should be his, and imagines, the poem's word, imagines his father arriving to scatter them. The first 4 books of the Odyssey are called the Telemacheia, named for the son and not the father. They are one of the boldest structural choices in the history of Western narrative. Homer begins a poem about a homecoming by spending 4 books with a person who does not yet know whether there is anyone to come home. Why? That is what this episode is about. The poem opens with Athena descending to Ithaca disguised as a guest friend called Mentes. She arrives to find Odysseus' great hall occupied by the suitors, young men from Ithaca and the surrounding islands who have installed themselves in the household and are consuming its stores whilst pressuring Penelope to choose one of them as her next husband. It is worth pausing on what exactly the suitors are. They're not simple villains. They are aristocratic young men behaving in ways their culture partially permits. Because Odysseus has been absent long enough that the question of whether he is alive is genuinely unresolved, and in this world an unhusbanded woman of property creates a legal vacuum that other men have an acknowledged interest in filling. The rules of Homeric hospitality, xenia, or guest friendship, do not forbid a man from courting a widow. What the suitors do that crosses the line is install themselves in the household, eat without invitation, and behave as though the decision were already made. They are guests who have become occupiers. Homer captures the situation in 3 lines near the poem's opening. Telemachus sits among them, in his heart imagining his brave father, hoping that he, come from somewhere, might make a scattering of the suitors through the palace, and himself be master of his own possessions. The triple relationship, father, son, household, and what has gone wrong with all 3 is established before the poem has barely begun. Telemachus is not passive. His frustration is real, his moral sense is clear, but he lacks authority. He is young and untested. The legal situation regarding his mother's remarriage is genuinely unresolved, and the suitors are individually stronger than he is, and collectively could overwhelm him. What he lacks is not will, but capacity. The competence that comes from experience, from having exercised authority, and having had it recognized. The first 4 books are the story of how he begins to acquire it. Athena's role in the Telemacheia is that of a divine mentor, a figure who appears at the threshold of a young person's formation and guides them toward what they are capable of becoming. Her practical advice to Telemachus is clear. Call an assembly, speak publicly against the suitors, and then sail to Pylos and Sparta to seek news of your father. The journey is partly practical. He might learn where Odysseus is, but it is also, and more importantly, an education. By seeing how other kingdoms are run, by meeting the great men who knew his father at Troy, Telemachus will encounter models of mature authority and discover, by comparison, what kind of man he is supposed to become. What distinguishes Homer's divine mentor relationship from its later inheritors is the psychological precision with which it is drawn. Athena does not simply direct Telemachus, she encourages him. She tells him he has something of his father in his face and eyes. She creates the space in which his own courage can develop. She does not supply the courage herself. When she departs, the poem says he felt her presence in his spirit. The growth that follows is not Athena's alone. She catalyzes something already there. Telemachus' speech in the assembly of Book 2 is his first public act, and it is both brave and somewhat ineffective. He charges the suitors with violating justice. He appeals to the community to act. The community doesn't act. The mechanisms for addressing the suitors' behavior exist in principle. Homer's world has assembly, has norms, has something like law, but the will to use them is absent. The community has been looking away, and it continues to look away. This leaves Telemachus with only private initiative, and he takes it. He sails in secret in the night with a small crew that Athena helps him assemble. It is a genuinely dangerous act. The suitors will try to ambush him on his return, but it is the only act available to him, and he takes it. Homer is very precise about what the Telemacheia accomplishes. Telemachus does not arrive at Pylos or Sparta as Odysseus' equal. He arrives as a young man looking for a father, and what he finds instead is a picture of his father. The reputation Odysseus carries among the men who knew him, the grief they still feel for his absence, the standard they hold up against which Telemachus can begin to measure himself. Books 3 and 4 take Telemachus to Pylos, where old Nestor holds court, and then to Sparta, where Menelaus and Helen receive him. Both visits work on multiple levels at once. They provide narrative information. What happened to the other heroes after Troy? Is there any news of Odysseus? They offer contrasting models of successful homecoming, and they situate the Odyssey within the broader story of the Trojan War's aftermath. A world of returns gone right, returns gone catastrophically wrong, and the one return still unresolved. Nestor's account of the Greek hero's return is a catalogue of disaster. Agamemnon murdered by his wife and her lover, Ajax drowned, others scattered. The contrast with Odysseus' situation is pointed and dark. The men who did come home mostly came home to catastrophe, while Odysseus, who cannot come home, at least has a household worth returning to. Barely. Only because Penelope has held it. The figure of Agamemnon haunts the Odyssey from its first pages. His story is the antitype of Odysseus's, the homecoming that goes wrong because the wife was not faithful, the household not protected, the returning warrior's identity not preserved against his absence. Every time Homer mentions Agamemnon, he is using him as a negative example against which to measure what Odysseus is attempting. The poem is, among other things, a meditation on what distinguishes a successful return from a fatal one. The Sparta episode is the most complex of the two visits. Menelaus and Helen have recovered something like domestic happiness, but the poem's presentation of their court is quietly haunted. Helen, now back as the model housewife, dispenses drugs to relieve the grief of the evening's conversation, a gesture that is both generous and slightly unsettling. Menelaus weeps repeatedly for those who died at Troy. The court's opulence, gold, silver, ivory, amber, is impressive and slightly uneasy, a prosperity purchased at an enormous price, enjoyed without quite being free from the weight of what it cost. Telemachus leaves both courts with a clearer sense of the world and of himself. He has not yet found his father, but he has found an image of the man his father was. So why does Homer begin this way? Why spend 4 books on the son before giving us the father? The simplest answer is that the Telemacheia establishes the domestic stakes before the hero arrives to contest them. When Odysseus finally returns to Ithaca in Book 13, disguised as a beggar, we already know intimately what he is returning to: the degraded household, the loyal servants, the patient wife, the son who has begun to grow into authority. The emotional weight of the homecoming depends entirely on what the first 4 books have built. But there is a deeper argument in the structure. The Telemacheia is Homer's insistence that the story of homecoming is not only Odysseus' story, it is also the story of everyone who waited. Penelope's 20 years of holding the household together, Telemachus' 20 years of growing up in the shadow of an absent father. The Odyssey's subject is not just the hero's journey, it is the cost of absence and the work of restoration. And that cost is borne most heavily not by the wanderer, but by those who stayed. Coming of age is one of the oldest structures in narrative. Telemachus, Hamlet, Stephen Daedalus, the young man who must find himself in the absence of a father, who must discover who he is before he can act. This is a problem that recurs in Western literature precisely because it is a problem that recurs in human life. Homer didn't invent it, but he gave it its first, and in many ways still its most precise literary form. Next week we join Odysseus for the first time. He is on Calypso's island, a paradise by any objective measure, and he is weeping. He's been offered immortality, eternal youth, and the love of a goddess. He sits on the shore every day and stares toward Ithaca. In one of the most remarkable acts in all of ancient literature, he chooses mortality, difficulty, and home over everything the goddess can give him. We will look at what that choice means, and why Homer makes it the poem's first truly defining moment. I'll see you next Thursday.